Welcome to Growing a B2B SaaS. On this show, you'll get actionable and usable advice. You'll hear about all aspects of growing a business to a business software company. Customer success, sales, funding, bootstrapping, exits, scaling, everything you need to know about growing a startup, and you'll get it from someone who's going through the same journey. Now your host, Joran Hofman.
Welcome back to another episode on the Grow Your B2B SaaS podcast, where we discuss all topics on how to grow your B2B SaaS, no matter in which stage you're in. You can only make one first impression, which means it has to be good, as it is very likely that 40 to 60% of your free trial users never use the product a second time. That is what we're going to talk about today: how to convert more signups into loyal customers, aka how to improve your user onboarding. My guest today is Ildefonso Prieto, is a product growth consultant who helps SaaS companies to grow their free to paid conversions. Welcome to the show, Ildefonso.
Thank you so much, Ron. I'm happy to be in the show. Super excited to geek out on user onboarding with you today.
We already did it before, so I know why people should listen to you. But I always like to ask this question: why should people listen to you today?
Yeah, for sure. That's a super fair question. I like to answer with a little story about myself and how I came up to be where I am. So basically, I studied entrepreneurship in my undergraduate program for the World Center of Entrepreneurship in the University of Houston, which is the number one program for the school for entrepreneurship in the US. And on my last semester, I started a marketing agency, a growth hacking agency, in which I started doing free stuff, like some simple, what I could get, some emails, for example. But then slowly but surely, I got a paying client that I was doing some simple stuff, email with, but they were super happy with that. And they opened up the door for me to start doing product analytics for them. So with that, I was able to not only have like amazing email campaign that their customers are super happy with, but I ended up identifying a bunch of gaps in their products using their data. So they gave me raw data from their purchases on Excel spreadsheets, and I installed Mixpanel. And together I cross-checked the data to make sure it was good. And then I identified that they had a gap in their funnel that was huge. And basically we came up with a strategy of eliminating one page and the next page change it with copy based on user feedback. And from there, we got a 32% conversion rate on that landing page alone. And because we eliminated the step, it turned out to be like a 3% increase in net bottom line, which was huge. And we were also able to calculate their proof of retention, which was 90-day repurchase rate, also 30 days and 2 weeks. But we calculated that, and they ended up getting a bunch of funding and around. And anyways, that was like the first taste of this journey. And from there, it was just doing all sorts of things. I ended up doing social media marketing, SEO, content management. I did a little bit of paid marketing, a lot of email marketing, a lot of product analytics. And I was all over the place. I had a mentor who kind of just talking to me about all this stuff and teaching me. And one of the things he mentioned was that for SaaS products, user onboarding is huge. And I was like, user onboarding. Okay, cool. Let me see what this is all about. This is just another growth hacking realm that I need to get into. And I started studying it and I thought, whoa, this is so crucial. This is so important. My mentor was right. Like, this is at the foundation of growth for SaaS products. And then I really wanted to dive in, but I wasn't there yet to go all in on it. I was still more on the content management side. And then I had a meeting with a partner of my mentor and my mentor, in which he's a data analyst and he has his own software tracking tool for B2B software products. And basically all of his data analytics is based on onboarded users. So their whole philosophy is based on onboarded users. To me, that just clicked. And I was like, all right, this is the moment that I have to pivot from doing anything for everyone to doing one thing for one persona, which is B2B SaaS product. That when I identified that was like the huge opportunity. I was like, all right, complete focus, all in. This is no longer just like a fun thing to study and geek out on, but this is like real. And since then, I went hardcore. Like after that, I just went hardcore into user onboarding. I became the user onboarding guy. Everybody here is at the Hacker Dojo knows about user onboarding guy. Ended up getting a bunch of clients. So like I've had over 12 user onboarding specific clients or clients specific to user onboarding. So basically that's how I got into this realm. I started from everything, but then narrowed down all the way into realizing that user onboarding is the thing for me. I forgot to mention there was a specific case study that kind of made me have a turning point for me. And it's a Twitter case study. And basically, he's talking about user onboarding before user onboarding is a term, and how he applied it to Twitter and how he was responsible for massive growth. So that was like my favorite case study all time since before I even knew what user onboarding was. So when I saw that and I realized, oh, this is user onboarding, this is definitely my thing. So that's how I got into becoming the user onboarding guy. I hope that gives you a little bit of understanding into my realm and who am I and how I can help you with user onboarding. I'm the user onboarding geek.
Nice. We're going to start with the simple questions first for the user onboarding guy. So I guess let's start here. What is user onboarding in your opinion? What does it actually entail?
There's a lot of definitions out there, but to me, my opinion onto what user onboarding is helping new users get started with your product and moving forward into their goals. So they came to you for something, and user onboarding is all about getting them started and getting them to that something, to that value. And you do that by teaching them how to use that product and guiding them through the actual path that is the fastest towards value. If I had to summarize it, I would say it's all about like helping new users get started with a part of your product by teaching them how to do it and guiding them through the fastest way to value. That's the thing. And I would add something here that I like to use because, again, there's so many definitions out there, but sometimes I like to drive in what user onboarding feels like with an example. Imagine that your users are like Tony Stark. So your software is the actual Iron Man suit. It's a super powerful software that will make him super powerful. So together, your user plus your SaaS become a super powerful person. It's almost you're just making a better version of the user that he already is. You're just making them better. You're giving them superpowers. So in that metaphor, user onboarding would be like Jarvis explaining and helping and guiding Tony Stark through how to learn to use the suit in a way that he gets progress and that he ultimately actually becomes that superhero that he wants to be. Because obviously the first time Tony Stark gets on the suit, you see it on the movie, he doesn't do it. The first task he talks about is just to do a little flight test. And you see him, like just that quick win, that first win that he gets, it's like in his brain, I'm already seeing that it's likely that I will be able to do this. And it's, again, user onboarding would be like Jarvis or the Iron Man suit helping Tony Stark understand how to use the suit itself and help him to become the superhero that he wants to be. That's the example I like to use for user onboarding.
Yeah. And I think you explained it really nicely, as in helping them to get started, but to get value out of your tool. So we're going to dive into mistakes a little bit later on. But I think this is one thing where a lot of companies do make the mistake, including ourselves after our conversation last week, where we asked them a lot of questions, but we're not actually helping our users to get value out of the tool. Like we're asking a lot of information, but it's actually not helping them. It's helping us, but not helping them. So I think that's definitely a good point. Help them to guide them towards the value. I stole one of your lines, right? 40 to 60% of free trials users never use the product a second time. Like why do most users drop off?
Yeah, for sure. So this is a super scary statistic. And let me just dive a little bit into it and then tell you why this happens. Just to give you context, that's basically half of every new user churn. And this happens so quickly. They sign up, play with your product for 5 minutes, and they never come back. So it's super scary. 40 to 60%, half. This is a killer. Churn is a killer. And many of the reasons why so many software products end in a plateau is because they have the profits, but the churn is eating out of those profits and they're not able to grow because it's just stagnant. Basically, to target this, there's another study that goes into why this happened. And this one is by Dan Wolchnuck. And basically, he was working for a product that was bought by HubSpot, recently acquired by HubSpot. And he was working on the user onboarding experience without still knowing that it was called user onboarding experience. But he was basically working on the user onboarding experience. And the research he did was that he found out that there was a bunch of new users that he would call drive-by users. And drive-by users is just a user that signs up and plays with it for a few seconds and drives by, just leaves. So that's literally what the other quote was about, right? So he goes deep into this and he tries a bunch of things and he's able to figure out how to unlock growth. But what he's able to understand and discover and what helps him make that jump is that he asked these drive-by users in an experiment, why is it that they're not coming back? And he finds out several reasons. But the two main reasons that make up over half of the new users that answered the research was, number one, is that the users didn't understand what the product was about. And number two is that the users didn't see the value of the product. So let me break down those two for you a little bit. Problem number one is that people have a mental model of what your product does. And they're trying to understand what it is. And maybe they make a mental model in which they think that your tool does something, but in reality, it does not. Or in reality, you're a tool that does so much more, and that's just a little part of your product. So they sign up expecting it to be this big thing, specifically for that problem that they're trying to solve. And then in the user onboarding experience, they just see a bunch of other stuff and they don't understand what's going on. So I signed up for this, and this is not even this. It's all a bunch. I don't want to do this. Bye. In fact, actually, this is hilarious. Yesterday, I was talking with a friend and I was working on some stuff, and it literally happened to me. I was looking for a tool that all I needed to do was to change the color white to black on a logo. That's all I needed. And I ended up going through at least 2 to 3 products that I would sign up, and they would talk about the inversion of the color and how you would be able to do this hex thing. And then I would sign up, and it was like this whole like Photoshop thing with a bunch of things. And yes, you can do that, but the whole onboarding experience was not about that at all. Everything was like, so anyways, what my point is, I had an expectation of what it was going to be. It wasn't what I thought. I understood wrong. And then therefore, when I get there, this is not what I want. I churn. Okay. So it's just not what I wanted. So making sure that someone understands your product before they even sign up is huge, right? So that's one of the main reasons why people churn after the first experience. The second one is that they don't see the value of your product. And what this means is that they sign up with your product, they play with your product, and they're not convinced that you're going to get them to where they want to go. They're just not. They just don't think you're going to get them there. And this is because they didn't see the value. You sign up, you play with this thing for 5 minutes, you are not seeing any progress in your problems. You just feel like this is a waste of time because I'm just clicking a bunch of buttons. They're taking me through a bunch of skippable tours. This is not going to help me. I don't see the value. I churn. I go find somewhere else. I go find my solution somewhere else.
Let me ask you one question first, because now we know the problems, right? Like they didn't understand the product, they didn't see the value, but it's, I guess, one more basic question maybe. People now think, hey, I really need to change my user onboarding because we're not actually helping them to guide towards value. But what do they need to have in place before even thinking about improving their user onboarding? Like, are there any things you need to have as a B2B SaaS first before you can even start thinking of improving?
This is a hard question. Because honestly, I would say that you need user onboarding. User onboarding shouldn't be an afterthought. That's what I should say. User onboarding shouldn't be an afterthought that you have your product and you put it, and then now you're going to maybe add some stuff. A lot of people think about it like user onboarding, that it's all those product tours that you add on top of your UX. And that's honestly not user onboarding. It's one thing that you can do, but it's not like encompassing everything. So honestly, with that in mind, at any point of your stage, you should be thinking about user onboarding. It just depends on various things. What's your priority right now as a company? And also the other thing that I will say is that the bigger you are, the higher our priority starts becoming. But since the beginning, you should be thinking about user onboarding. Even if it's just a team meeting in which you say, all right, this is going to be the first experience for the product. We definitely have to take this into account. And this for super early SaaS companies, that they have to focus on retention. And why I say this, that even on early stage, you should focus on user onboarding, is because user onboarding is tied to early retention. And early retention is a huge deal, right? Because if you make changes in week 1 retention, on the retention curve, those results will cascade over time and carry on for the rest of the lifetime value of your users. So it ultimately raises up your entire retention curve. And by doing that, the area below the retention curve is bigger, aka you're making more money. But again, for earlier stages, they would focus on how user onboarding will impact their retention. And then after that, once you're a little bit bigger, you probably will change your focus into, because you have already proven retention at this point. Once you've already proven retention, then you're moving into more virality stages and revenue stages. And when you get into those, that's when you're starting to look into, all right, I need to get the most lifetime value out of my customers. So how can I make sure that my conversion rate, my free to pay conversion rate is higher, and also that my upgrade sequences are higher. So revenue sequences can be done in a way to increase more lifetime value. And you can do all these. So basically, I don't know if you can see the angle when I'm talking like that, but basically one angle is like, one's focused on, hey, I just need to increase retention and make sure getting closer to product market fit. And the other one is more like, all right, we've established quite a bit of product market fit. We got retention. We need to focus more on getting more buck out of each user, basically. And that goes along with pricing strategies and all the sorts of other things, but user onboarding is definitely a part of it, right? To answer your question, and I went on a rant, basically you should start of it yesterday.
Yeah, that makes sense. Don't wait too long. Let's just dive in indeed, like into improving the user onboarding. So we had the study of Dan. So the drive-by users didn't understand the product, didn't see the value. I guess if you would come in or if you would recommend now other SaaS companies to improve their user onboarding, like which steps should they take?
So it always depends on the company. That's the problem. But I can tell you the main things that I see that I like to tackle. The first thing I like to tackle is the first user experience. Like we said, 40 to 60% of users churn after the first experience. So that first experience is extremely important. So the first thing I should focus on, the 20% that gets 80% of the results, the first user experience. After that, there's some growth hacks that you can do that once you've optimized your first user experience that you can add on top of that. Otherwise, that doesn't work. But basically, there's some growth hacks that you can do to guide your users in that first user experience and even to call them back. For example, trigger emails is a good one that I like and super powerful. But basically, first user experience, growth hacks that help the first user experience. Then you go into sign up conversion rate. This is all about people having problem getting visitors to sign up. They're not communicating what their product does. They're not getting people to understand what the product does. They're not getting people excited about the product does. And then finally, the other area I really like to tackle is product analytics. And that's tied with the fact that your product analytics should be tied with user onboarding. Like your retention is based on onboarded users and your revenue is also tied to onboarded users. Like just basically product analytics with a user onboarding philosophy behind it, like the data analyst guy that I told you guys at the beginning. So those are the things I tackle. If I would suggest to the people hearing is try to identify which one you're struggling most with and go all in. And to most of you, I would say 90% of you, it's the first user experience, just the first user experience, just polish that. If you polish that, you will be set, basically. I like the metaphor of baking a cake and the icing. So the first user experience is baking the actual cake and the spongy cake. And if that is good, then that's awesome. And if you add good icing on top of it, that's amazing cake, right? But if you have a terrible cake and then you add amazing icing on it, doesn't matter how amazing the icing is, the cake is going to taste horrible. So if you don't fix your first user experience and you add a bunch of growth hacks on top of it, it's still going to be horrible. So basically focus on that first user experience.
Yeah, that makes sense. And maybe one question here. I think the most common thing a lot of SaaS companies have is they have a dashboard. And when people land into the app, it's going to be empty, right? You have zero numbers. You have no charts, no graphs, nothing, because everything is going to be zero. So I guess talking about the cake, you have that shape of a cake, but you don't actually know how to bake it. So how do you help people to actually make that cake in the first place?
Yeah. So again, to me, it all comes down to that first user experience. It's like the main hitters. If you need to just focus on one thing, focus on that, man. And I do have a framework that I want to share here. But before I do that, I kind of want to mention some of the common mistakes that I've seen from my clients. Maybe some of you are experiencing, and maybe you can relate to and see if it can help you guys out. But the first one is literally that you just said. That's also why I thought it was a good segue, because my first common mistake that I see is that people have an amazing product. And this is literally something a client told me. It's like, if they would only spend the time and effort to get to know my product, they would fall in love with it and never leave. I was like, yeah, but no one's going to spend the time and effort to do that. You need to make it easy for them. It shouldn't be a whole bunch of time and effort. But this is a big problem, because what ends up happening is that you drop the new user into a dashboard with zero direction. Zero. You just hope for them to find value. And sheer probability on just the amount of clicks they have to make It's just negligible, the likeliness that they will finally find value in your product. So that's why you need to guide them. You need to basically create a road for them that they're going to follow in that first user experience, and that you make sure that you clear any obstacles that are in the way, make sure that the asphalt is like as the best possible so that they go fast in it. You make it as easy as possible for them. Ideally, what you need to do with that problem, the problem is not people just being dropped off in the dashboard or in your product, whatever. If it doesn't have to be a dashboard, they maybe just get dropped in your product randomly, and for them to hope to find value, that's a huge mistake. And the way to fix it is to give them direction. Give them a path that they need to follow to get value. Help them that you know how to get value more than them. They just met you. They don't even know what's happening. Way better. Help them through that. So that's a big mistake I see. Another mistake that kind of relates to good segue, it's that people don't even understand your product, right? And we kind of talked about this before, but people don't understand your product before they sign up. And this is a huge problem. They should understand what your product does before they sign up. This is a big mistake. A lot of people are hoping that people are going to understand. Oh, they'll understand what my product's all about once they use it. They're never going to use it because they never understand it. So you need to get them to understand before they get to use it. It also streamlines the whole value to them. Like they'll be able to get through the road faster because they know how to use the skates. But that's a common mistake, not getting people to understand. And that's when I focus on sign-up conversion, like I mentioned before. The other thing is the sign-up path is often super difficult. A lot of people make the sign-up path super complicated. I don't know why, but it's a common problem. And for example, I had a client that asked for 14 things for a sign-up. And I was like, yes, I know you're still selling. It's a B2B thing. And I get it. You still want to ask quite a bit of detail. But man, 14 things is a lot when in reality, all you needed was 2. If you really wanted to minimize it, you really could do it with 2. I understand. Maybe you want to ask 3 or 4. But the more you add, the more friction. In this case, it was a lot of friction. And they were like, why are people not signing up? I'm like, man, you have a huge problem here. Let's focus on this and streamline. So yeah, that's one thing that I also see. First UX. So I keep hammering the first UX. And this is because another big thing I see, and actually the narrative across user onboarding, is that user onboarding is product tours, tooltips and checklists and all these little tools, because there's so many user onboarding SaaS tools out there. And yes, they can help. These are the icing on the cake, like I was saying. But most people don't treat it like the icing on the cake. They treat it like the cake itself. And they just have a broken UX. That's a problem. They have a broken first experience. They have broken user onboarding. And they just add on top of it more UI. And that just makes it worse. So on that note, the idea and the suggestion in my consult always is remove everything and test how your funnel is doing without any of that. Identify where your gaps are. And you once you remove this, you'll be able to identify, it'll be very clear where people are like not moving forward. And in there, that's what you need to fix. It's basically a signal of, hey, this is where it's broken. This is what you need to fix this. And then once you know it's fixed, then you can add other growth hacking tools that will make it better. But for now, I would suggest turn it off and do an experiment. Turn it off, test it, see where the broken stuff is, fix it, and then add again your stuff. But it would be a super valuable thing to do for your team in general with the first UX problem. Another mistake is that I don't see people tracking a lot of user onboarding. And I think that's also understandable just because, like I said, the guy who basically instilled this philosophy in me is super underground and not many people understand. And he's super data analyst god, I would say. Like he knows so much about it that I can see why not everybody knows that. And why I can see why he's like an industry leader on a thing. So that I can see why not everybody, but it's a thing and super valuable. And then how you track the improvement on the first user experience changes. Another thing I see a lot is mistaking activity for achievement. What I mean by this is that even when you're trying to craft the first user experience, I'll be in a workshop with the team and they will struggle. Their mindset is, all right, I need to get them from point A to point B in my software. What are the steps within my software? And that is the wrong mentality. The shift you need is what's the path in the real world for my user? What's the value path in the real world? And then from that path is how you craft the click. But you're not focusing on getting them to click as much in your software. Nobody likes clicking on stuff. Nobody's doing clicking for fun. Everybody's doing it because there's some value behind it that they're going to get. So don't mistake activity for achievement. And by that, activity is just clicking stuff. Achievement is that in the real world, they got value. They moved forward in their journey. Maybe they're an email marketer. They sent their first email campaign and got an answer in the real world. That's the vibe. But those are some of the mistakes that I hope some of you can identify with and hopefully address ways to help you with those.
Nice. And I think like I might steal a sentence now from you here, but the one thing you mentioned to us as well, as in like basically map out the entire funnel indeed, as you're mentioning right now, like how do people actually get value out of your product? So which steps they need to take? Like, for example, in our case, we basically started at the website and we just tracked everything. So what do they need to do? What kind of information do they need to fill out? And what do we actually need? And the recommendation you gave us is if you don't need it, scrap it. And in the end, we scrapped a lot. We still need to implement it. So the sign up is, if you're going to go now, then it's still the same. But we put it on the roadmap. I think within 4 or 5 weeks, we're actually going to change stuff. And we're basically scrapping most of the onboarding things we're asking. And we're going to make a huge overhaul on it.
Wow, I'm super excited to hear that. You have to definitely let me know when you do, and I'll check it out.
Nice. Like we had a chat, right? Like when should other companies like reach out to a growth consultant or use an onboarding guru like yourself? And I think people know already what you can offer them, but when is the good time to actually get some outside help in?
Yeah, so it just depends a lot. But what I normally people reach out to me when they already know. It's like they already know that user onboarding is a problem for them. That's the feel I get every time someone reaches out to me. It's like, hey, I know, I studied it. I understand that this is important. I understand that it helps me scale my business. I understand all this stuff, but I don't know how to do it. And that's when I feel like that's the most valuable. It's when the person has identified that the user onboarding is a thing and it's something that they want to at least try to make something for it, to improve it. That's when they're stuck and they're like, oh, I don't even know where to begin. Or I've had other people where I've made changes and I just don't see the needle move. And I'm like, yeah, it's because of this and that. I guess it's when the need arises that you identified it. But like I said before, user onboarding shouldn't be an afterthought, and it often is. Honestly, it just depends. It just depends, man. Like I said, for example, early stage companies, if they notice that they need to focus on retention and they are looking for ways to improve retention, user onboarding is one of them. If that's a priority, let's go. If you want to improve free to paid conversions and more revenue sequences that extend lifetime value, then definitely go in, right? It just depends. There's many, at each stage of the companies, there's different things you can do for user onboarding, and it's different at different stages. So like a small company will basically, most likely will have one persona or very few personas, and it's very focused to a niche. The product is normally doing very few things. Whereas into a bigger company, then they're serving multiple personas. So now they have to customize each onboarding experience to each persona and personalize the new user experience. They also have to personalize a bunch of other event tracking and stuff that need to be specific to that. They also have to have a better support team, but it's a different mindset. It's almost like you never stop looking at marketing. You never stop looking at product, but there's definitely different things you should do at different stages. But yeah,
makes sense.
Basically, I have 2 frameworks for the 2 problems that I highlighted before, the understanding and seeing value. And I want to share with you 2 frameworks very quickly that will help you with these 2 problems. First framework is all about getting people to understand your product, and I call it the communications framework. Step 1, define your target market and your personas. Pick the most important one. Step 2, define the current situation of your potential users. What are they doing right now? How are they solving their problem today? Then you define the desired situation where they want to be. Where is it that they want to go with your product? Step 4 is defining in detail how your product bridges the gap from the current situation to desired situation. And then the last step is to, once you have that summary, try to list it out in 3 to 5 steps, 8 high-level steps. This way, you easily can have a section on your landing page that will communicate how your product will take them from current to desired. And for the rest of your landing page, only talk about the desired state of your product, of your user. Only talk about the desired state, show testimonials and proof, and make the sign-up flow easy. That's that's getting people to understand your product and getting to sign up. Then the other framework that I have is the first UX, which I explained a little bit, but I'll do the 3 steps very quickly. Is you define a goal for the first user experience of your product. This has to have a certain criteria, but basically you work with your team to define this goal. Then you map out the steps from the moment that a new user signs up to the moment they achieve this goal. And finally, with this list of steps, you look at each step and you ask yourself 3 questions. Is it absolutely necessary? If it's not an absolutely necessary step, remove it. Can you automate it? If you can, then automate it. But if you cannot remove it because it's absolutely necessary and you cannot automate it, then you need to find creative ways to simplify it. An example of this would be, instead of giving someone a link, code to embed on their website, why not just giving them the published link of their website ready? That's just one example that I threw in quick. But that's the 2 frameworks. Hopefully that helps out. Yeah, just wanted to make sure that was in there because I know that's big value for some people. That's every time I share that, people say like most of the value is there. So I want to make sure that was in there.
Nice.
I don't know.
It's definitely valuable. It's better than I explained it, but that's what you mentioned to us the other day where we went through it and we got a lot of value out of it. So I would definitely recommend other people doing it as well.
Thanks. I did want to mention that for anybody that's listening to this podcast and anybody that comes from Redditus, I will be giving them like special offers. So just to run you down, I do free consults in general. So if you just want to be hearing about me from before Redditus or everything, you just want a free consult, I'm happy to do this. Just go to saasgrowers.com and you can book your free consult. But for the people with Redditus, I'm actually trying to take in some new case studies so that I can have some good testimonials and data proof that build some good case studies. And I want the person that works with me to agree on that term, which means basically they like a testimonial, just tell me when things are changed so that I can look at it and see. And if you can share any data on the results that we provided. That's the thing for the case study. If you're good with that, then I basically extend the offer to an 80% discount on people on my services for people that come with Redditus. That's like for most of my services, but there are some services where I would have to give you a different discount. But again, if you come from Redditus, just say that, and then I will give you some very cool offers, basically.
Growing a B2B SaaS is tough. We know. This is why we started Redditus. We help you to grow your monthly recurring revenue without high upfront costs. How? By leveraging someone else's network and only giving away a commission when they deliver you a paid client. It's called affiliate marketing. It's already a really cost-effective and scalable revenue channel. We even made it better for you. With Redditus, you can start for free and only start paying us when you generate revenue. Learn more at www.getredditus.com.
When we talk about user onboarding, what kind of advice would you have for SaaS founders in different stages? And to begin with, somebody who's just starting out and grow to 10K monthly recurring revenue?
On the 10K MRR thing, you are looking more into retention. You're trying to prove retention as much as possible. And that's actually how you're going to get more money overall in the long term. On that stage, and I like to use lean analytics as a framework to understand how growth stages for startups work. And basically their way of thinking is, first, you empathize with people that you understand their problem and a solution that is working. Then you strive for stickiness, which AKA is retention. After you have retention, and only after you have retention, do you focus on virality? Do you focus on revenue? And then you finally focus on scale. But at this stage, retention, everything about retention. So if you're focusing on improving the user onboarding for any reason at all, it should be to get better retention. These are inherently tied together. So like I said before, it's the first user experience. It's half of the users we're going to churn. So retention, it's already there. And it's almost impossible to get your retention curve is going to churn some people. But user onboarding, well, focus is on making that handoff from marketing to product and getting people to actually experience the value of your product so that they stay. So for early 10K, I would focus on your user onboarding efforts helping retention. And some of the tips here, because I also wrote some tips. Specifically, I would focus on keeping the user onboarding short to the point, teaching the users by doing. Don't just tell them stuff, get them forward and moving, but make it quick. Also at this stage, qualitative data is more important. You don't have enough quantitative data to to pull the big guns on data, but qualitative data is super important, and you can get in under 24 hours, 5 user tests for the first user experience of your product almost instantly, right? That's another service I do, by the way, if anybody's interested. I do usability testing for the same reason. But basically, you can go yourself and do it. There's a bunch of tools that do remote usability testing. That's the data you should be focusing on for early stage. And then, like I said, focus on retention.
Nice. Exactly. We're going to go past 10K MRR. We're going to grow towards 10 million AR. How would the advice change basically?
Yeah, for sure. So this is when things start getting more complicated, right? You're starting to reach out to different channels, even for your marketing, and there's even more user personas. Your product does more things. So in this realm, the first thing I recommend is personalizing the user onboarding by personas. So each persona is there to do something. And if you can craft that journey for them specifically, they would quickly get to value, and they won't, you know how I mentioned before that sometimes that you land in a product that has all these other things and you don't even know where to start. You basically are putting blindfolds on them so they don't see all the other stuff, and they can just go towards their value. And then once they attain their value, then you can be like, oh, by the way, we'll do all this other stuff, but you got them to value. And that's for each persona. And because you're bigger and you do have more features for your product, you'll have more things to tailor. So personalizing is a huge thing once you are bigger. Another thing is you start focusing more on revenue. You know how before I was focusing on retention? At this point, you've already proven retention, and you can start looking more into data, like quantitative data. That's when I will start diving deep into quantitative data. Like it's a shift. But then you're looking for ways to increase lifetime value per customer, but also decrease cost per acquisition by activating more users. So if you're able to activate more users, your cost per acquisition decreases, therefore making your business more scalable. And that's literally what, at that point, you're trying to scale. So the main focus is to improve the relationship between cost per acquisition and lifetime value. That's the metric that you hear a lot about scalability. And it's 1 to 3, I think, the recommended one. So for every $1 you spend, you get $3. But that's what makes it super scalable. And that's what your user onboarding should be focusing on. And you'll have different metrics. And at that point, you need to define like the specific metrics. You need to have the onboarding funnel. Like data becomes like the biggest part here because you have it. And that's where you can't do usability testing with everybody. It's still useful, but at this point, you have so many users that they're literally telling you with the data what you need to fix. So that would be my shift in mindset. Another thing, you would start like looking into data analytics, and some of the metrics that I would recommend, by the way, it should be like onboarding conversion rate, time to onboard. So how long does it take people to onboard? And at this point, you'll be able to check literally what features of your product are leading to further engagement and which actions within the user onboarding experience are leading to churn. And if you're able to, at first, they almost look like correlations, right? But you might be able to see some patterns, and even maybe with your gut feeling and everything, but basically what the data paints, it'll paint, all right, if a user is using these features, it's more likely for them to onboard correctly than if they use these other features. And then you would have to track it by that persona. So that also depends, but it gets more complicated, basically. It's much more about data than it is what it was before. I think that would be my summary.
Nice. We are going to wrap things up. Like, I think this is now the longest episode. So I guess what we're going to do is we're going to add a couple of links, like the study you mentioned by Dan, the 2 frameworks, the lean analytics. So we're definitely going to link that.
Yep.
We're going to link, of course, to your LinkedIn profile and to your site. And then people can reach out to you. And as mentioned, you're going to give them free consultation if they want, because I think everybody can hear you have a lot of knowledge to share and you can really help people. That's one thing for sure. And I can say that from our own experience as well, from our conversation last week. And I think that's how I wanted to wrap things up. Like, any final short thoughts from your side before we end the recording?
Here's the final thought. Be user-centric, especially in that first user experience. Just focus as much as you can to get them real-world results. Real-world results, user-centric. That's it. I think that's like the main ideas that I would like to drive.
That's a really good closure. Thank you very much for coming on today, Ildefonso.
No,
and it was, again, a pleasure.
No, it was amazing. Thank you so much for having me.
Cheers. Thanks.
You've been listening to Growing a B2B SaaS. Joran has been a head of customer success before founding his own startup. He's experiencing the same journey you are. We hope you've gotten some actionable advice from the show. And we hope you had fun along the way. We know we did. Make sure to like, rate, and review the podcast in the meantime. To find out more and to hook up with us on our social media sites, go to www.getredditus.com. See you next time on Growing a B2B SaaS.